Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamunatira Vanachare. Jamunatira Vanachare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamunatira Vanachare. Jamunatira Vanachare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Ashtotarashata Shishimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Garantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Nitai Gaura Premanande. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to Shishiguru and Shigauranga.
Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're beginning a new chapter. It's entitled King Indra Annihilates the Demons. And we'll be reading text 1 through text 6. And I believe text 1 is on the board, which is the one we'll chant responsibly. That one doesn't have a purport. Okay. Shri Sukha Vacha Atso Shura Prachupala Pata Chetasaha Parasya Parasaha Parayanukampaya Jagnur Brisham Shakra Samiranatayas Tanrane Yair Abhisamhata Pura Shri Sukha Vacha Ato Shura Prachupalabda Chetasaha Parasya Pumsa Parayanukampaya Jagnur Brisham Shakra Samirandayas Tamstan Raneyar Abhisamhata Pura Shri Sukha Vacha Atso Shura Prachupalabda Chetasaha Parasya Pumsa Parayana Kampaya Jagur Prisam Shakra Samirandayas Tamstanra Neryairabi Shamhatapura. Please chant. Shri Sukha Vacha Ato Shura Prachupalabda Chetasa Parasya Pumsa Parayanukampaya Jagnur Brisam Shakra Samirandayas Tamstan Raneryairabhisamhata Pura. Shri Sukha Vacha Ato Sura Prachapalabda Chetasa Parasya Pumsa Parayanukampaya Jagur Brisam Shakra Samarandayas Tamstan Raneryairabhisamhata Pura. Shri Sukha Vacha Ato sura prachupalabdha cetasa parasya pumsa parayanukampaya Jagnu brisham shukra samirandayas Tamstan raneryadapi samhata pura Shri Shuko vacha Ato shura prachupalabdha cetasa Parasya pumsa parayanukampaya Jakyur besam sakra samirandayas Tamstan raneryadapi samhata pura Shri Shuko vacha Ato shura prachupalabdha cetasa Parasya pumsa payanukampaya Jagyur brisham shakra samarandayas Tamstan raneryadapi samhata pura Okay. So the word for text 1, Shri Shuko Vacha, Shri Sukadev Goswami said, Ato, thereafter, Shura, all the demigods, Prachupalabdha, Chetasaha, being enlivened again by revival of their consciousness. Parasya, of the Supreme. Pumsa, of the personality of Godhead. Paraya, supreme. Anukampaya, by the mercy. Jagnur, began to beat. Birsham, again and again. Shakra, Indra. Samirandaya, Vayu. Adaya, and others. Tan, to those demons. Rane, in the fight. Yai, by whom? Abhisamhataha, they were beaten. Pura, before. Translation. Sukadev Goswami said, thereafter, by the supreme grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Hari, all the demigods headed by Indra and Vayu were brought back to life. Being enlivened, the demigods began severely beating the very same demons who had defeated them before. So I'm going to read through up until, or including text 6. So text 2. Vairochanaya sanirabdu Bhagavan Pakashashanaham Udaya Chadyada Varyam Prajaya Heti Chakrushushu. The translation. When the most powerful Indra became angry and took his thunderbolts in hand to kill Maharaj Bali, the demons began lamenting, Alas, alas. Text 3. Vajrapanis tam ahedam, tirashkritya purastitam, manasvinam susupanam, vicharantam mahamurde. Translation: sober and tolerant and well equipped with paraphernalia for fighting, Bali Maharaj moved before Indra on the great battlefield. King Indra, who always carries the thunderbolt in his hand, rebuked Bali Maharaj as follows. Text 4. Natavamuta mayabir mayesanno jigisasi jitva balan nipadhaksan nato harati tadanam. Translation for text 4. Indra said, "O rascal, as a cheater sometimes blinds the eyes of a child and takes away his possessions, you are trying to defeat us by displaying some mystic power, although you know that we are the masters of all such mystic powers." Text 5. Arurukshanti muyabir uchishripa shanti yedivam tandasyun vidyunomi ajnan purvasmagcha padat adaha. Translation for text 5. Those fools and rascals who want to ascend to the upper planetary system by mystic power or mechanical means, or who endeavor to cross even the upper planets and achieve the spiritual world or liberation, I cause to be sent to the lowest region of the universe. Purport: there are undoubtedly different planetary systems for different persons, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 14:18. Udavam guchanti sattva stam. Persons in the mode of goodness can go to the upper planets. Those in the mode of darkness and passion, however, are not allowed to enter the higher planets. The word divam refers to the higher planetary systems known as Swargaloka. Indra, king of the higher planetary systems, has the power to push down any conditioned soul attempting to go from the lower to the higher planets without proper qualifications. The modern attempt to go to the moon is also an attempt by inferior men to go to Swargaloka by artificial mechanical means. This attempt cannot be successful. From this statement of Indra, it appears that anyone attempting to go to the higher planetary systems by mechanical means, which are here called Maya, is condemned to go to the hellish planets in the lower portion of the universe. To go to the higher planetary systems, one needs sufficient good qualities. A sinful person situated in the mode of ignorance and addicted to drinking, meat eating, and illicit sex will never enter the higher planets by mechanical means. And text 6. Soham durmai nastedya varena sata parvana siro harisye mandatman gata svagnyat bihi saha. Translation: today, with my thunderbolt, which has hundreds of sharp edges, I, the same powerful person, shall sever your head from your body. Although you can produce so much jugglery through illusion, you are endowed with a poor fund of knowledge. Now, try to exist on this battlefield with your relatives and friends. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Romapada Swami Iti Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this beginning of this 11th chapter, we find Indra is rebuking Bali Maharaj. And he's rebuking him because Bali Maharaj had just displayed his mystic powers. And the way Lord Indra is rebuking Bali Maharaj is to point out to him that the demigods are the masters of mystic power. So, in fact, Srila Prabhupada states that because Lord Indra is the king of the heavenly planets, he's actually got this power to be able to push down any conditioned soul that's attempting to go to those planets, if the persons attempting to do so don't have proper qualifications. So this power that Lord Indra has is that of causing anybody who's attempting to go to those higher planets by their mystic power, or even if they're using some mechanical means to try and go to those heavenly planets, his particular power is to send those same entities to the lowest regions, meaning the hellish planets in the universe. Now, Srila Prabhupada is explaining in the one purport here, the only one that's there in these 6 verses, that there are different planetary systems for different persons. So Lord Krishna makes the statement to this effect. He says that those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. So it's particularly designed, so we can take it we're all in the mode of passion, because that's the categorization for being on the earthly planet. So the criterion that needs to be met is the degree of development of the mode of goodness. And that's what allows for this transfer of the living entity to the higher planetary systems, or at least the upper planetary systems. The upper planets that Lord Indra is referring to here with Bali Maharaj is Satyaloka or Brahmaloka. It's the highest of the upper planetary systems. And it's also the planet where the foremost person in the universe, Lord Brahma, is residing. And it's also the place where the condition of life is referred to as wondrous. That's the word that's used. So this development of a manner of acting or a manner of being that's in goodness can only take place through this system of Krishna consciousness. It's the only way to actually move from the mode of passion into the mode of goodness. And the criterion that's been used by Lord Indra, or rather the criterion that's been used to allow for this ascension to the upper planetary system, that of the process of Krishna consciousness, is one that requires submission to Lord Krishna. So it's submission that allows for advancement in the process of ascending to the higher planetary system. So you can see it's quite a contrast. And this is Lord Indra's criticism. On the one side, there's the attempt using mechanical means, machines, or even not having qualifications, but trying to use mystic powers to get liberated. And then you hear what is the actual means for going to the upper planetary systems. And the actual means is actually submission to Lord Krishna. So it's such a humble position and acknowledgement of authority that's allowing for one's movement to the upper planetary systems. So what it means is that one is adopting this principle of becoming humbler than grass. So completely humble. And it's that state of being humble, or adopting that principle of becoming humble, that's bringing freedom, and particularly freedom from the laws of material nature. So Lord Krishna explains this too, and it's explained in Bhagavad Gita in the 18th chapter, in the 58th verse, where he says, and these are his words, "If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not knowing me, you will be lost." And I'll read the Sanskrit because it's very nice, this verse. Makchitaha sarva durgani mat prasadat tarisyashi ato chet tvam ahankaram na chirosyashi vinankshayasi. So Lord Indra, he's decrying the attempts to go to Swargaloka by artificial mechanical means. So one could say he's decrying acting on the false ego. Indeed, the understanding on the part of those who are acting in passion is it's defined by Lord Krishna as not being able to distinguish between what's a religious act and what's an irreligious act, or even knowing which action should be done and which action shouldn't be done. So that's the functioning in the mode of passion, functioning from the sense of false ego. Can't make proper distinctions of which action to perform, can't distinguish properly what's religious and what isn't religious. So Srila Prabhupada clarifies that it's persons who are acting in passion and ignorance on this earth who can't forcibly try to approach the higher planetary system. And particularly he gives the example of the attempts to even go to the moon, because it's the usage of machines, so again, mechanical means. And whereas it's an internal process of humbling oneself to Lord Krishna that's allowing for that kind of travel. So, machines can't do it. So he emphasizes, again, that it's good qualities and a sufficient amount of those good qualities which allow for this ascension to the higher planetary systems. So you can say, if what's allowing for the good qualities is the system of acting in goodness, or of being conscious of Krishna, then we can extrapolate and say that one cannot avoid whatever is actually that happiness or that distress that's unique to one's particular body, because that has already been ordained by Lord Krishna, because it's in accord with his particular decision that one has received the particular body. So this has relevance in terms of Bali Maharaj being criticized by Lord Indra. In a different section of the Bhagavatam, you have Lord Brahma, who's actually making a very similar point to Priyavrata. And it's a time when Priyavrata descends from Satyaloka to Bhuloka. And this is what Lord Brahma tells Priyavrata. My dear Priyavrata, according to our association with different modes of material nature, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives us our specific bodies and the happiness and distress we achieve. One must therefore remain situated as he is and be conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, exactly as a blind man is led by a person who has eyes with which to see. That's in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 1st chapter, 15th verse. So the idea is to remain in the condition that's been allotted to one, because that condition has been allotted to one by the Supreme Lord. So all that's required is following his instructions, which is that process of surrendering to him. So you can see how something of the background of how it is that Indra is in that position to be very critical of Bali Maharaj. So we understand that the demigods, including Lord Indra, they're being conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we know this because earlier on, it was stated that the demigods are always under the shelter of the dust of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. And they were able to easily drink the nectar and get the result. The demons, the leader of whom was Bali, not having sought shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, were unable to achieve the result they desired. And that was just a little bit earlier on in the 9th chapter, in the 28th verse, where this is directly stated. One could infer that Lord Indra's words, and I'm particularly drawing from text 7 where there's purport, Lord Indra's words to Bali are connected to Bali's use of mystic power. And we heard that yesterday. Lord Indra states, in the same way that he was critical of mechanical means, he also is saying that mystic power cannot be used to ascend to the higher planetary systems. And what had transpired earlier is that Bali Maharaj, he had first attacked Lord Indra. So this was the earlier, just prior to this criticism of Lord Indra. What took place is Bali Maharaj and Lord Indra were head to head, so to speak, in combat. And Bali Maharaj had attacked Indra with 10 arrows. And he'd also attacked Airvata, Indra's carrier, with 3 arrows. So it's mentioned very specific. So the elephant is getting 3 arrows, but Lord Indra is getting 10 arrows. And he'd also attacked the horsemen that were guarding Airvata, because the horsemen are kind of small. If you stand in front of an elephant, which I've done in India, although the elephants there are smaller than African elephants, even an elephant in India, it feels very small, even relative to the legs. So there are horsemen that are protecting the legs of each elephant. And Bali Maharaj had even attacked those horsemen that were guarding the legs of the elephant, Airavata's legs. The results had been that Lord Indra, he just smiled and he counteracted those arrows. One presumes the 10 arrows, the 3 arrows, and each of the arrows for the horsemen. So he counteracted all of them, 17 arrows, with extremely sharp arrows of his own, which are called Bala. And Bali Maharaj, his response at having his arrows being counteracted with the very sharp arrows, he couldn't restrain his anger at seeing how well Lord Indra was managing this. So, he was angry at how expert the military activities were of Indra. So he made a second attempt, and he used a weapon, a firebrand. It's called a Shakti. But even before the firebrand left his hand, Lord Indra cut the weapon into pieces. And indeed, whatever other weapon Bali Maharaj attempted to use, and I think Nityananda Pran was joking, we just needed to remember all these various weapons that are used. So I'll list them since they're very interesting. He attempted to use a lance, so a piercing instrument, and the others I don't know what they translate into, but a prasha, perhaps you know the words, I don't know, Romara, Rishtis. So these were some of the weapons he used. So each of these 4 other weapons, and apparently there were some others too, they just got destroyed even before they left the hand of Bali Maharaj. In fact, they were like cut to pieces, into little pieces by Lord Indra's strength from a distance. So it was after this defeat that Bali Maharaj then used his mystic power and he appeared to disappear. And he utilized illusion. So yesterday was a description. So this illusion that Bali Maharaj then used, because he just suffered these defeats of all his attempts at using any weapon, was to generate a giant mountain above the heads of the demigods, and then from the mountain there were burning trees that were falling. There were chips of stone with sharp edges that were falling. And then a whole avalanche of creatures, everything from the insect world to mammals. And of course, the mammals that were chosen were all the ferocious ones, and the insects that were chosen were all the poisonous ones. So a whole avalanche of creatures was falling from the mountains. So from the insect worlds, we got the scorpions. And from the reptilian world, there were snakes, very large snakes. And then the ferocious animals that were coming. So, it wasn't that deer were falling or elands or zebras, nothing like that, or giraffes. Rather, it was all the ferocious animals, the tigers, the lions. And there were some boars too. I guess they're a little bit ferocious because they have the tusks. And great elephants. So elephants you don't think of as ferocious, but at least I guess they added weight, illusory weight, because if everything's dropping onto their heads, an elephant would certainly be useful from the point of view of crushing. So this was the mystic power that Bali Maharaj was using. So in what we're reading today is Lord Indra's response, his anger about Bali Maharaj having used these mystic powers. And further, of course, in the usage of mystic powers was the appearance of hundreds of man-eating demons we heard yesterday. So they were carrying tridents. So you just got an avalanche up ahead, and then coming towards them are all the trident-carrying demons also uttering, usually words that are malevolent words. They pierce the heart. So even if the tridents are not directly piercing, just their words were enough to pierce, because they're saying, cut them to pieces. And then he didn't let go. He kept going with using his powers of illusion, because he created clouds, again, coming from above the demigods. They were live coals, so burning things. So before it was the weight and the creatures that induced fear through their ferociousness. And now it's actually something that's burning. So the clouds were throwing live coals. And he heightened the fire, the heat, because he created a devastating fire on top of it around them. And devastating winds, so a lot of physical distress. And then, if that wasn't enough, really using his mystic powers, and I don't know how this worked, because floods were then created. So after the exposure to the fire, so I presume the fire had to move out of the way for the waves to come, huge floods. Apparently it is described as like sea waves, so very high waves. So these were the mystic powers of Bali Maharaj that were being criticized by Lord Indra. And interesting, because it's connected to the earlier statement of how Lord Krishna needs to be dealt with, where we have Priyavata, Lord Brahma talking to Priyavata. He mentions that it's necessary to accept Lord Krishna as though one is a blind person, just being led by him. So it's very passive. Like if you see a blind person sometimes on the street, they're very passively following their guide dog, very passive. And they sometimes use their stick, but they're completely dependent on the animals. So that's the kind of way that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has to be acknowledged. And how did the demigods respond to all this illusory creation that came from Bali Maharaj? And it's said in an earlier verse, wholeheartedly they meditated upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And true to his word, Lord Krishna, I think I quoted that verse from Bhagavad Gita, where he actually indeed helped them to overcome all the obstacles that they were confronting at that moment in their life. So immediately he appeared. He was visible to the demigods. It doesn't mention he was visible to the demons. And by his transcendental prowess, that illusion just vanished in an instant. So waves, fire, falling animals, a mountain just vanished by Krishna's transcendental prowess. The minute he appeared, just by the demigods taking shelter of him. And and it's over here that Indra is telling Bali Maharaj. He's telling him, although you can produce so much jugglery through illusion, you are endowed with a poor fund of knowledge. This is his, finally, face to face, he gives his opinion to Bali Maharaj of his whole display. Poor fund of knowledge. And that poor fund of knowledge is that he hasn't been working in a consciousness of Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna, which is what the demigods were doing. Everything they did, they're working in consciousness of Lord Vishnu. And indeed, to achieve success means achieving the favor of Lord Vishnu. And it also implies that success is not the possession of the yoga siddhis. That's not actually success. And those yoga siddhis are that ability to appear, to disappear, which Bali Maharaj demonstrated. Or it's the ability to appear to enter into the bodies of others. So we don't know if any of those ferocious animals had any, anyway, they were there. And it's also to be able to see things that are very far away. So these are all yogic siddhis. It's also the ability to travel in outer space at the speed of the mind. So these are the yogic siddhis. And the Sanskrit listing is usually of 8 siddhis, and there's also the ability to become very large, or to become very small, or to become very heavy or very light. And I'll just read the listing as it's usually given. Anima, Lagima, Mahima, Prapti, Prakamya, Ishitam, Vashishtva, and Kama Vashayita. So that's usually how they're listed. So I don't know which one translates as which, but I've said the English. Since I didn't find the exact correlation of the Sanskrit and the English. So it's no wonder that Lord Indra is telling Bali that trying to defeat the demigods with mystic power, it's like, first of all, the demigods are the ones who have control of mystic power. This is what he's saying, they're superior. This is his criticism. Of course, you could say that's opinion because they're not demonstrating that mystic power. Bali Maharaj has demonstrated, but Lord Indra is saying, you're trying to use your mystic powers, but after all, we're the masters of mystic power. So he's kind of ridiculing Bali Maharaj. And he's also pointing out to him that the usage of the mystic powers is comparable to an adult putting a cloth over a child's eyes and then removing the child's possessions because the child can't see. So it's kind of been a little cheating. So this is how Lord Indra is rebuking Bali Maharaj. And you get a similar view of mystic powers where Srila Sukadev Goswami is in a conversation with Maharaj Parikshit. He tells him that those who are advanced in spiritual life, they don't put faith in the mind because the mystic powers are coming from the mind. Indeed, they always remain vigilant. So persons who are advanced in spiritual life, and this is the reason Lord Indra can say we are masters of mystic power, and you can say, but they're not displaying them. And the reason it's not being displayed is this one that Shukadev Goswami is giving to Parikshit Maharaj, that somebody who's advanced in spiritual life is always vigilant and watchful of the mind's actions. So you're never letting the mind go, always watching it. This is something again in the 5th the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 6th chapter. So the reason this is so, that the person who's advanced in spiritual life as the demigods are, that they're keeping that vigilant watch on the mind, is because they understand that the purpose of the yoga system is to achieve the favor and the shelter of Lord Vishnu. And this particular purpose was covered for the demons by Yoga Maya, or the Lord's illusory energy. And Lord Indra is justified in his attack on Bali Maharaj. So I've tried to expand a little bit on Lord Indra's attack on Bali Maharaj and I guess his rightful attack. And so it's open to discussion if anybody has some thoughts they'd like to share.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your class. Your last point you were mentioning is that we shouldn't place faith in the mystic mind because it gives us a lot of illusions. And that was kind of the original question I was going to ask. It's kind of related to the first verse. The first verse of this chapter says essentially that the demigods were killed and brought back to life by the Lord. That's kind of seems like what at least I'm sure everyone agree with that. In spiritual life, that's what it seems. It seems like our demoniac mentality kills us, and then somehow other devotee brings us back to life, or the Lord. So my question essentially is that when you're in a battlefield, sometimes it becomes so exhausting. You're like, surrender to the enemy. And the same way for the demigods. So how does one become essentially not discouraged? Because we can see that, many people leave Christian consciousness because, what other reason is their demoniac mentality is killing them, making them dead, practically speaking. There's no other reason why you leave Christian consciousness. But there's a famous saying that says, you can run, but you cannot hide. So wherever you go, there's no other solution but to, beg for the mercy of the Lord and control your mind. And for me, there's no other process better to do that in Christian consciousness. There's no philosophy better than that. So how does one become not discouraged by one's demoniac mind? Because then we could see that that's what happened with devotees. They maybe leave or then they have to go somewhere else. For me, I'm sure they'll come back to Christian consciousness, but they don't want to come back to the same community maybe. So how does one not get discouraged basically, and persevere through one's demoniac mentality? And can you expand on those points a little bit?
Thank you very much, Jai Baladev, for pointing out that in many ways one is on a kind of battlefield because there's the demoniac tendencies in the mind, and your question has to do with in which way can one not become discouraged by those demoniac tendencies in the mind, which you've said have often taken people even far from devotional communities, and perhaps they've resurfaced but not even in the same community because of this huge battle that's been lost to the mind. So the mind, Krishna tells us, can be our greatest friend or our greatest enemy. And the picture you've pointed to, having drawn from what was discussed here, is that one finds oneself in a position where the mind is one's greatest enemy. So that means that the mind is actually often managing to override the intelligence. So when the mind is overriding the intelligence, then those particular urgings that are not, I guess, in the mode of goodness, that aren't in line with instructions of Lord Krishna, they'll become prominent. So because one is practicing Krishna consciousness, one actually can see that the pushing of the mind is in conflict with what one is trying to follow, those instructions of Lord Krishna. So that's why it becomes such a battle, because one sees the discrepancy. The mind is asking for something else, and the knowledge one has got from the instructions is requiring one to act in a different way from what the mind is dictating. So then there's an internal conflict, which you described, that it's like a battlefield. So the battlefield has to do with the intelligence overriding the mind. So the question had to do with how not to get discouraged during the course of that fighting, that internal battle. Well, the main way to get encouragement is certainly to, I guess, express something of one's internal battle, either to oneself in writing. I'm a big proponent of writing, because when one puts something on paper, at least for oneself, it's like one's put it outside of oneself, so it isn't so hard to identify things internally, because the mind is not an ordered entity, so to speak. So because of its disorder, it's nice to actually put on paper, then one can actually clearly see what the issue is at hand. And then the encouragement comes from, one can actually then dispassionately look at it and with one's intelligence say, well, I'm making a choice to act in this way versus that way. So the mind may be pushing one to, view a particular person in a particular way, which makes one feel angry, let's say. That's the most common one. One looks externally, so one finds an object, and the mind is dictating, be angry with this person. So then, when one puts that down on paper, the thought is, I'm going to, bash this person with my words in this and this way, and then, one's rubbing one's hands internally. Yes, I can't wait to go on this. This person sure deserves it. So you put that on paper and you look at it and you say, well, now my anger is even increased. But then but then the intelligence, says, well, if I'm actually getting angry just by having put this on paper, imagine if I were to act on this. My anger wouldn't get relieved. It would only get heightened. So I actually wouldn't be achieving anything. And plus would come the breakage of a relationship. Even if it was not a relationship one was wanting to pursue, at any rate, it would have a ripple effect on other relationships, and one would have to feel mortified that one couldn't control that urge in the mind. So better to do it on paper and encourage oneself. Well, this appears to be a good course of action, but I'm not going to follow this course of action, because it's going to mean, something like feeling completely mortified that I couldn't control my mind. So I'm certainly not going to act on this. And instead, I'm going to choose to steer clear of this person until I can manage my mind better. So, one tries to develop a strategy using the intellect for how one will deal with that urge in the mind. So you have to think of a strategy, because if you don't think of a strategy, then you're going to find yourself confronted with that huge rage or whatever every time one sees the person, So you don't want to do that. You have to have your strategy in place. So your strategy might be, I'm going to, move my cloth a little bit this way so I, avoid seeing. And then, it's remarkable. That saves one from a huge amount of anger. So just as an example. So some strategy is needed. And the other source of encouragement in the battle, Because, one may on a daily basis be confronting the same thing for a long period of time, is certainly to do as the demigods have done. Go and take the shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, and standing in front of the deities and very honestly stating, my mind's pushing me this way, but I don't want to go that way. I humbly pray. I pray for a shelter and protection from my mind. I truly pray for that shelter, that my mind doesn't actually override my intelligence in any way. And the encouragement is there because, again, one's revealed one's mind. And in front of the deities, there's a sense of protection. And one carries that sense of protection with one. So when one is actually perhaps just averting one's head in that example, one remembers one's got the protection of the deities, and somehow one is stronger in following the strategy that one's chosen to adopt. So those are some thoughts. Very simple, but it's quite effective.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the nice class, Mataji. I just have a pretty random question.
Okay.
It's about Brahmaloka. Are the inhabitants of Brahmaloka, they're like, because that's the topmost planet, and Lord Brahma lives for an extremely long time. So in comparison to Lord Brahma's kind of lifespan, are the inhabitants kind of the same, like, life? If you know.
The question is, if in Brahmaloka the inhabitants have a lifespan that's comparable to that of Lord Brahma, yes. Yes. And what is permitting that long lifespan is the level of functioning in goodness. Everything's peaceful, ordered, regulated, calm, devotional. So it's, what brings about a shortened lifespan is not functioning in that mode of goodness. So, for instance, being unregulated in one's habits brings distress, disease, being not having that shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, meaning trying to gratify one's senses, so an overexposure to sensorial things, that's what shortens life. So all of that is absent. All of that is absent. So no iPad with lots of visuals, none of that is there. So yes, very long lifespan because of the very regulated lifestyle with that devotion to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.